Welcome to Beast TV. Tonight, we welcome back Kain Michael. There's no mountain he won't climb, or no thicket he won't bushwhack. A researcher's researcher. So get you a fresh dip and buckle up. Happy Halloween, Larry Porst II.
Happy Halloween. Trick-or-treating?
Where did you get that Halloween mask at?
I bought it at Walmart.
Oh, okay. Well, they tell me I don't need one.
That may be right. I was looking for a Batman mask and a wig, but I couldn't find one.
I bet I know somebody that might have one.
Me too. I wonder who it is.
Yeah, we may be talking to him here in a minute.
That won't be one of the questions, though.
Well, I tell you, I'm really excited. We had Eric Tipton on last week, and we got his research partner, Kain Michael, on tonight. So let's jump straight into it, and why don't you introduce Kain for us?
Well, this fella here, he might take a deer skin and tan it and make pants out of it. He may strip the bark off a tree and make a necklace or bracelet out of it. There ain't no telling what he'll do. I think last week we were talking about him trying out for Naked and Afraid and Alone all at the same time. He might do that too. But this dude, whenever he gets in the woods, him and Eric both, they're just impressive. The things they find, the ideas they come up with, and just the degree that they go through. I know Kain goes out every day, and I wished I had that kind of ineptitude. No, it ain't ineptitude. That's what I got, ineptitude. Maybe it's fortitude to go out every day. But anyway, that's enough about Kain. Kain, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Happy Halloween. I'll tell you right now, if someone shows up in my cabin with a mask on, they're getting shot.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, it's a little far out in the woods for anybody showing up trick-or-treating.
You know, I've lived here for 30 years, and I've never had a trick-or-treater. I guess living in the country and not having sidewalks, and, well, maybe it's that sign that judge made me put out in my front yard. But I'm going to tell you, that judge and policeman and preacher man, they're liars. They're all liars. I'm just kidding. But Kain, man, there is a huge difference between hitting the woods on the weekends and doing what you do, which is being in the woods every day. Kain, tell us some of the advantages and knowledge you are acquiring because of this dedication.
Well, you know, there's really two processes when we all get together and we go on an outing. You've only got a week, and so you're throwing out all the stops. You're on a time clock, and you're trying to get a reaction. So you're doing a lot of stuff to try to bring them to you. what I do here is I'm looking at the big picture and the long haul and observing. And after I observe, I basically, I'm noting everything, and I'm actually learning the woods, living in the woods, and out in the woods every single day, so I can observe things the day after activity happens. I was fortunate. The last place I lived, just purely by accident, was at a place that had activity, and I started noticing things right away. Already being a Bigfoot researcher at the time, but driving 2 hours away looking for Bigfoot. So I was seeing stuff, and I saw a few things out in the woods, and I got Eric and I brought him over. I showed him some things, showed him some footprints in the creek and a couple little structures. And he said, "Yeah, I'm not buying it. That's not enough." And he said, "Keep looking, keep working on it and see what you come up with." So it was really at that time that I decided, I had the right area. I wasn't sure if that indeed was the case, that we had activity there. So I started going out every night. And it took me almost a year to really learn the area, find everything that was in the area. And I brought Eric back and just kind of said, "Hey, walk with me." I didn't lead him. I just let, you guys are with Eric. He doesn't need anyone to lead him. But we just kind of walked and walked through the woods, kind of where this stuff was at, and let him do his thing. And he's like, "Okay, when do we start?" So that ended up being a period of at least 3 years at the old property, hiking every night. And what that did was, once I established everything that was in the woods of my area that I was looking at, I was able to start noticing and documenting things the day after they happened. And once you get that, you can start looking at what time of the month, what was the weather like, all these other scenarios. And it led into finding 18 structures the day after they were built, and starting to log and put together theories. And so I had a huge database there, and started looking at the big picture, not just this one teepee structure. I started looking at it almost like a Google Earth view. I was like, wow, this is starting to correlate. There's a lot of the same structures in the same type of area, and all these different parts of the woods. And really, through that process, started really learning the advantages. And I started documenting, like, trees that would be lean, like what we call leaners, sticks, leaning up against a tree. And then as the months would go by, these sticks would move to different trees, and maybe there'd be one stick, and then the next time there'd be two. All these little things that you would never ever be able to recognize if you're only in the woods, every other weekend or every week. It's this little stuff that is going on right under our nose, that the only way you can really do it is to document it every day, really get in there. So then I left that property. I ended up in a camper for a year, trying to decide, what the next step of my life was going to be. And I decided I wanted a cabin in the woods, but I also wanted a cabin in the woods that was close to, some kind of activity. I want to be able to walk out my back door and hike. So I found this cabin. No one has lived in this cabin full time for 20 years. This was some families' vacation cabin that they would only come on the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Very secluded. It's basically 3 miles from 1,000,000 acres of state parks and national parks. There's almost 1,000,000 acres of just that within 3 miles where it starts. Then you have all the private land. So what I did was, when I was looking for a place, I noticed stuff that I'd seen at my last property up on the same ridge line as I was coming to this property. So I thought, well, okay, that's good. I checked out the cabin. I loved it. It's completely secluded. There's no neighbors. There's no lights. You're very much in the wilderness here. Just by opening the window, you are in the woods. You can hear it. So I had an inspection. The guy was going to be here for 4 hours. When I was in the process of buying the cabin, I told him, do your thing. I'm going to go hike. Did it for 4 hours. And then I saw some signs, but they were old. But I'm like, you know what? It's close enough to the national parks. It's close enough. There's stuff right down the street. They're around. And that was the deciding factor of me just moving here. And basically, once I got here, I got settled in, and then the work started. I went right back to the same regiment of getting out. First and foremost, I had to get out and see everything that was in the area. Like I said, at the time when I first walked it, I saw some old stuff. Very close. I kind of call it no man's land because this property ties into thousands of acres. I mean, just you can walk and get lost. Thousands of acres. Just you can walk it. So I started finding other signs, not too far away. And so I just kind of documented everything that I could find. And it's, taken close to a year, just this area and the surrounding areas trying to really find everything that's in that area, document it, take pictures, learn where it's at. So when things start to change, you're like, hey, that wasn't there before, and start basically just building a database.
Right.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Kain. You went from your old property and now you're on this new property. Did you hone in on the same areas that you were finding similar structures and different things, or did you cover every bit of it just like it's brand new just to see if it correlated with what you figured out in the past?
It definitely helped having some experience doing that, but I really did just blanket the area and started documenting everything that was there. It was a really long process because every day something's new. I would make like a perimeter around my cabin and go in a circle every day, just a new place. It was a new discovery way beyond my property. Just keep walking basically till dark. And my goal is to try to get home at least on my property by the time it's dark. And I would find something, I'd document it, and I'd go, and I keep going until, I pretty much made a circumference around this whole place. And by that time, I had a lot of very interesting sites. And it still wasn't clicking, like pretty fast. Within a couple months, we realized, I brought Eric down here, and we kind of walked it, and we found a corridor that we call corridor, a swath of woods that they use that came through my property. And that was also kind of where initially I found some stuff. So in time, that was started to make sense. It's like, okay, we have something going on, and occasionally when things are passing through, they might use this swath of property or this corridor on my property. That's no guarantee because it's all theirs. But it was a starting point. So we kind of focused on that, and then started expanding. And I slowly, this all started coming together. I kept hiking further and further away. I'd find more stuff. And one thing that I do that I started this years ago, but when I'm hiking and I'm wherever and I find something interesting, a teepee structure, whatever, I'll take, and I have my own signature that I will do with sticks. It's not a teepee structure. It's just something I can do real fast, but it's definitely manipulated and very easily noticed. And I'll stick it in the ground wherever I find one of these. And then I have that same thing on my property, that I've made. Like, I'm telling anything that has happened to be paying attention, hey, I saw this, and if they ever make it by here, there's that same, so, okay, it's an identifier. Like, okay, that's who's doing that. He lives here. He lives in this cabin. And that paid off. It took a while, but I had done this, and it was quite a hike. But I found it was a really, really cool looking thing I found out in the woods. But nearby there was something I had. It was a signature in the woods that I had never seen before. And I thought, you know what? I don't know if this is anything or not, but I'm going to put mine right beside it. So some time went by. I go out on my daily hike, and where I have my little signature, beside it was this thing's signature, miles away.
Wow.
On my property, right beside my signature. And that was a mind-blowing moment for me. That was like, my face went numb because I know how remote this area is. I know what the chances are that, what I do, 99.9% of the people around wouldn't even notice it. It's a pretty natural looking signature that I do, but it's right beside something that looks pretty natural too, but manipulated. That was what I would call my first contact here. From there, we started doing the stump game. For a long time, I had a stump that I was doing something on, and a couple of weeks would go by. I'd go out there, the stump would be changed. So I started documenting that. And then I got greedy. I hit a trail camera in a dead tree, hollowed it out. You could not even see this trail camera. It was just a hole in the tree with a trail camera shoved in kind of down by that stump. I took a lot of effort to hide this thing. Actually, up in the trunk of the tree, I was up about a foot. All you could see was the lens if you looked at it straight on. It lasted like a day. Wow. And the entire side of the tree was ripped out. There was my trail camera, and all the activity stopped. Almost, it felt like I was being punished, But another thing that I started doing to try to get back to, so there was things going on, we were pretty sure, around the property. But I wasn't able to bring them in, per se. So I started doing the signature, little twist thing that I do. But I also started drumming. And I do Native American drumming in the summer almost every night, 15, 20 minutes before I go to bed. But at least 3 nights a week, I still do that. And I do that as an identifier. Again, for me, one, it's anything that's curious. Those drums carry for miles. So anything that's out there that's curious, once it's going to start identifying that drum plane with me. And it also knows, hey, he's out there, whatever's listening. And it was really cool over the course of time. When I first started drumming, the crickets would stop, the animals would scatter. But over the course of almost a year, I can sit there and play the drums. The crickets don't stop. The deer sit there and look at me 20 feet away. The squirrels, throw nuts at me. They're so used to me. I've made myself part of this property.
It's either that or they think you're crazy and they're just looking at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's how things started to evolve. Another thing, I don't think you can stress enough, is when you live in the woods. I mean, I went from a time of being in the woods all the time to making this huge life decision to live in the woods. I mean, when I lay in bed at night, I can crack my window, and within 15 feet of my cabin is a ridge and 100-foot tall trees. You get a sense of what the woods sound like. You get a sense of all the cycles of the woods, of when the squirrels are out, where the deers are going, when the turkeys are resting for the night, and just the way the woods sound when it's normal was huge for me. It's something that took, a long time of just listening. And after you do it for so long, it really is easy to identify when something is not right. Sounds that you never hear. The woods really are deathly quiet. There's your typical sounds that you get used to hearing, but you don't hear trees falling. You don't hear trees breaking every night. If you do, there's a huge storm or something. But during a regular time, woods are very quiet. My family came down this last weekend, and my niece was sitting in the living room, and she's just looking around. She's like, "Oh my God, it is definitely quiet here. There's no street noise. There's no neighbors. It's just silent." And that's kind of how, when the woods are calm, it is silent. And that really has helped me just get my head around listening, to what's going on out in the woods, listening to what animals do to warn, the birds, the crickets, everything. It's a concentric system. When a predator walks into an area, it strings these alarms naturally. The bugs, they all help each other. All the prey kind of lean on each other. From the crickets to the birds will call you out. And it just goes through the forest. And the more you're in the forest, the more you hear that, the more you identify there's something in here. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Going into the woods and looking for evidence is way more complicated and complex than looking for just the obvious, such as X's and structures and tree bows. When you step off in the woods, what are some of the not so obvious things you are looking for?
You're absolutely correct. And this is something that we learned. If we jump back to the last property, and we found the day after they were built 18 structures, we monitored those structures that were built for almost 2 years every single night. We documented that there's only one structure out of that whole thing that ever had activity. They were built 2 different times, 2 nights out of the whole year. 18 structures were built in 2 nights, and only one of them ever had activity after the fact. So that's a huge eye-opening thing to like, wow. Now, they do a lot of things in the woods, like blinds, and there's all these other things that they do on a more regular basis. But some of these structures that we documented, I watched them fall apart. I watched them every night for 2 years. Just basically, slowly, they didn't care about those structures. They weren't coming back. They weren't using them. They weren't sleeping in them. You know, it was just something that happened.
So what was the point of them, Kain? Come on.
I don't know. I mean,
Me neither.
that is something that we're slowly starting to grasp, and building a lot of documentation on here. But, you know, I got a nice idea of what I think was going on there. There's some things that I know was going on at the other property. Some things I figured out, and I wish that learning what I've learned now that I applied the things then, but I didn't know. You know, now I know a lot of other things to look for that I've learned from here that would have been so helpful there to kind of figure it out. But there were certain things that I started, you know, when you're formulating a theory, you have to name it something. So I would start naming markers compared to blinds, compared to nests, just for my own reference. So I would have something I could fall back on and start comparing to. The old property, there was markers at very specific places in the woods, and that was the only places those were used. A certain type of marker, and it was really interesting. At one point, from doing so much research in that area, I found 3 generations of that same marker in these woods. And you were able to tell that the first set, the trees were old, totally covered. I didn't see them for a long time because they're so covered with brush, and they're big. They're really big. And then I actually noticed the other ones before I noticed that one. There was a smaller set, much newer, you know, more in my time. And then there was a little set. You know how you talk about imprinting?
Yeah.
It really looked like it was teaching a small one how they do this. And the only concept I could come up with was that there was 3 generations here, and they've marked their territory, if you want to call it that. For some reason, they did this over a course of 3 generations. So what I'm trying to get to is when you mention when you go in the woods and you find the obvious, I've been trying to talk about, it's not tree structures, it's not X's. The problem you have there, and it's a mistake Eric and I had to learn. It took us years to learn this. You find a nice teepee structure, it really doesn't mean anything unless you can tell how new it is.
Right.
It could be a teepee structure that has been there for 6 years. And we would do that. When we first started out, we would find something and we were like, oh, this is a great area. We got structures, we got X's, and we would go there for a year and be like, yeah, man, there's no activity. We slowly had to learn that those are great to find. That means at some point, that area, they were in that area. But you've really got to put it in perspective when you're finding these things that they might be really old. And that's where, when I walk into the woods, like I said, when you're on an outing, you only have a week. When you're doing this on a more permanent basis, the first thing I do is I go out and I establish everything that I can find as far as I can go. And
Hey, Kain.
Yeah.
Before we jump to something else that you find, we got a couple of questions on structures. I don't want to get too far past that.
Okay.
Of course, one of the questions is, why do you think they build the structures?
Okay. I think this is solely my opinion of just what I've experienced. There are, if you imagine, okay, I already stated some of these elaborate structures I don't know. I believe they build them. But there is a lot of stuff they do that is on a more temporary basis. Like, let's say a blind where you see all the sticks kind of making a just blocking an area. That could be that it was sleeping there for the night and just wanted some cover. I've also seen it when you go through an area and they are trying to get from point A to point B, and there's areas where there's no cover. They'll add that cover so they can kind of look from one spot, go to the next, blind and peek around that and work their way through maybe a populated area. I believe there's some markers that signify human. Maybe there was a human here. The X, everybody sees the X. I think that really has multiple meanings. A lot of people, generally I think it's kind of like a stop, but it could be, hey, I'm up here, stop. It could be a boundary. I mean, I think you have to look at it per each case individually, because I really do think, we had trail cameras marked with an X.
Yeah.
So I think it has multiple meanings. And I think all this, Eric and I, and that's one thing Eric is so good at. He's always grounding. Like, you can't say a Bigfoot made a tree structure because you had never seen one. But something is making structures and doing this. So we try to approach all this by not saying that Bigfoot did it, but hey, this is actually happening and we can document this. We can document right now. We can document that these are not random. I could present that today with enough documentation that I believe I could give to a college professor and he would actually look at it, because it's mind-blowing. Once you really dig into this, and we've been doing this, we've been documenting these for years, several counties, states, and getting all the information that we can get from them, it's quite eye-opening when you look at the big picture. So some of the stuff that they do, what I like to look at it is, imagine a group of commandos, or a cavalry, or a troop of Indians. When they have the group, the first thing all these throughout history would do was they would send out scouts before the group, just to see, hey, what's ahead, what's the safe route. And I think a lot of that is what you're seeing. Some of the stuff that you're seeing is a temporary message. One of them's going through, and let's say it sees some humans, on the trail. It does something, something as they go by, they recognize. Or there's a weird looking box that looks, like a trail camera on a tree. They don't know what it is, but it's his job to identify that and put an X in front of that tree and say, hey, don't go this way. And I think a lot of that stuff is kind of on a very temporary basis, just passing information back and forth to each other so they can get through an area safe. And I think that theory holds water when you're looking at how hard they are to catch on trail cameras, how hard they are to find, how they can remain hidden. There's so many stories about a Bigfoot peeking in someone's window. There's tons of those accounts. What I believe is happening there is a family group passing behind that Bigfoot, and he was looking in that window to make sure the coast is clear. And once the family group goes by, there he goes.
Rick wants to know if you've had any peeking in your cabin or slap the side of your cabin.
I not that I've known as far as peeking in my cabin. I have a bunch of really interesting stories about rocks being thrown. They love my carport. I'll be a lot of times, especially in the summer, I sit out in the dark on my deck, and they'll run up and my carport's 10 feet or so off the ground, and dude, they'll smack that and they'll sound like a gunshot. And I mean, it scares the living hell out of me every time it happens. That happened one night. I was hearing something across the pond, and it was just a light knock, and I'm sitting in the dark in the corner of my deck. So, and I'd been out there 45 minutes, just quiet, not doing anything. So I did a mouth pop, and immediately from behind, something comes crashing down through the woods. It sounds like an elephant, and it smacks my carport. And I mean, literally, I jumped up and immediately walked into the cabin and like chastised myself. Like, man, this is what you're waiting for, man. But it scares the hell out of you. So
Slade Monk would say he got you.
He got me. So I did. I went back out and I walked to the corner of that deck, and I was within 25 feet of where that happened, and I turned my back to it. And I just hung out. Nothing happened. So then I did all this stuff. I went back in the house. And I just made a spectacle of myself. But in the process, I put a recorder in a screen-in porch that I had, and checked it the next day, and literally had something open up my screen porch door, kick the recorder, go to the door that was going to my cabin, jiggle the door, and then sit there for 6 hours. And you could hear breaths, you can hear shuffling. And then after 6 hours, it was in my screened-in porch area for 6 hours, right before I got up to go to work the next day, maybe a half hour before it walked out. And in the meantime, the recording knocks and stuff going on out in the woods. And this thing's in there. And at one point, it doesn't knock. It like, I don't know if it taps the roof or whatever, like signaling back, like where it's at. So, yeah, no real sighting of anything looking in my cabin, but definitely very close.
All right, I jumped you off the structures onto that, but that was a good story.
Yeah,
and I just wonder what was going on there. Was it a juvenile telling his other juvenile buddies in the woods, "Hey, I'm still in here. Bet y'all can't do this"?
Yeah, I tell you what, it kind of freaked me out, because that's a really, really, like, it's stupid dark out here anyway. I have a light outside that goes maybe 10 feet of light, and it's pitch dark. And I never once thought to look in my screen porch when I'm going in and out of the cabin, especially in the mornings when it's pitch dark. And I've literally changed my whole regiment in the morning because of that one time. Usually when I get up in the mornings, I walk by, I peek out there. Okay, that's good. I have a keyless start on my truck. I turn that on. The lights are on. I flick on the lights in the back, and then I still got to walk out there. So
What you're telling me is you're scared,
Larry.
Precautious. when it knocks on my carport, yeah, I'm scared. But definitely take precautions every single morning. Because, man, you don't know. I mean, here's a good example. This is a bear that I found in my backyard.
Yeah, I'd crank my vehicle too and turn on the porch light.
And this right here is its front paw. So, but still, that's the bear's back paw.
Yeah,
That's its front paw, and that's was found 20 feet from my cabin.
Yeah, that's a big bear.
Yeah.
I double check everything too before I went out there. All right. Jinky wants to know, out of the 5 or possibly 6 senses that a Sasquatch has, do you think that sight would be considered the weakest one that it has?
I think it's pure speculation for whatever I say, because we don't really know. I think during the day, you're probably right. I can't put my head around something that can see great in the dark and great in the day. I'm not an eye doctor, but I would think at night, their eyesight is much better than ours, because they hide. They hide. You know, we've witnessed them hiding at night, like they think you can see them as well as they can see you.
Yeah.
And I think their hearing is phenomenal. I think a lot of times when they're tracking a person or tracking Eric and I out in the woods, I think a lot about hearing. And I don't really know, like if you look at any kind of hooded nose, our nose is not built to be a good smelling nose. But I also believe that if you're in the woods your entire life, your nose is going to be way more keen than ours. I think they do have a great sense of smell, but I still think they probably have to get it kind of close and probably can pick up perfume and you know, Axe body spray or whatever. Yeah, they might smell from us or smell that we've been around. Just like I can kind of tell if I'm out hiking, if a bear's been through that area with my, you know I don't have a good smelling nose, but I can smell, you know, when a deer have a musk to them. You can smell horses. If you're on a horse farm, you can smell, you know, the horse musk, and you can smell bear musk. So I'm sure their nose is pretty good. So I'm sure it's a lot better than ours. And I mean, I just have to guess that their eyesight's really good at night.
All right. Since you first started researching, what has been the biggest change in your beliefs about Bigfoot?
Good question.
Oh yeah.
That's from Heather. She come up with that one.
I think when I first started researching, one of the things I thought was that we were just going to go out in the woods and we were going to just, if we were diligent enough when we walked the woods from one end to the other, that we're going to find something. So quickly we learned that we never found a Bigfoot village. We never found houses, and it was very hard to even find them. I think the more you learn, the more your theories evolve. I never, like, I'll talk to anybody. I'll talk to the most woo person out there and the most diligent person that says it's just an animal, because to me, nobody really knows yet. I tend to believe now, just through my own experiences, that it's more than an animal. I believe that a lot of the stuff that we see out in the woods is signs of some type of humanity. I'm not against the idea that there's smarter ones than others. You know, there might be different classes. But that's probably the biggest belief that's changed, is just that I think it's more. I mean, we talk and you hear Eric's account. You know, he had an eye-to-eye account. He said that thing looked like a Native American, you know. Is that just up here? We don't know. You know, I've never had that eye-to-eye. I've had sightings and stuff, but I've never faced one and looked at it to formulate my own opinion. But just by what I have seen and researched over the years, I think that throws a lot of people off, because for a long time people were saying, well, a human can do that. I'm thinking, yeah, what are we looking for out here? We're looking for something that has hands and feet. And so, yeah, if you can use your hands to do it, doesn't mean a human, you can't disregard all that stuff. It's not, and that's another reason why Eric and I really try to go remote, because it slims the chances that some guy is out in the middle of the woods making an X that someone may never find ever.
Right.
And that's what I love about private property. Like your research area, it's great if you can find a property that there's no public on. But the private property, like here, it's me. I can monitor that. If something changes in my backyard, I know a hiker didn't go by and do that. And I also know just by the remoteness of the area, I can walk. I've never ran into another human out in the woods here. It was so vast. I mean, you're literally talking about thousands and thousands of acres. You can just go. It's like from my point all the way down to the Ohio River, which is half the state of Ohio, is under cover of woods with parks and private property in between it.
Well, tell me this, Kain. Whenever you do find a structure, how do you differentiate? What do you look for? Because of all the bushcrafters and the survivalists going deep in the wood. Well, they may not go as deep as what y'all do, but you know what I'm saying. You find a structure of some sort. How do you differentiate between possible bushcrafter, survivalist, or a possible Bigfoot?
Being, so into the outdoors, there's certain rules. Let's say for a structure that you're going to sleep in, you can look it up. There is a foundation. Okay. You need to keep the rain off you. You need to keep the wind off you, and you got to stay off the ground. That's like survival 101 is, you got to put down a bed of leaves. You got to get something to block the wind, and you got to do something to keep the rain off of you. A lot of these structures, if you look at them in that regard, one, none of the sticks are cut. They don't block the wind. They don't block the rain. There's nothing on the ground. There's no evidence of fire. It's a terrible human survival structure. And then what we try to do is anytime we find something like that, we note it, but we really try to find like 3 other things that we look for in the same area, that is an identifier that only these things do. And there's some things that me and Eric over the years, we keep really close to our chest, and we do that for a reason. We don't broadcast this because of that reason alone. We want to be able to say, okay, nobody knows about this. So when you see this or this or this, you can't be hoaxed because no one has a clue that happens. Everybody's paying attention to the structures and the X's, and there's all these other things. And another thing that we do is we're trackers. We track. I mean, that is a huge source of everything that we do. And when we're following and finding corridors and all this stuff, we are tracking, legitimately tracking prints. And it doesn't even have to be a print, but everything in the woods, everything leaves a sign of its presence. And sometimes you have to get down on your hands and knees, and you might go 10 feet in a half hour just to find, that next step. That's the epitome of research that people miss, as they find a print and they take a picture of it and they're like, cool, we got a print. They might cast it. They don't
follow up.
Yeah. Eric and I will spend weeks and months on the same, and it takes that long because they do some incredible things and it throws you off. But we'll just go, weekend after weekend after weekend and just stop where we started and keep tracking. And before you know it, you've got this big swath through the woods, like, sweet, and then in that time, if you find some of that stuff, then you've got tracks, literal prints to put with that. That helps you kind of decipher what's doing it. If you find humans are terribly messy. Humans have a certain gait that they walk. They have a certain stride. Very easy to identify by a human walking versus something else. They do a lot of stuff. Humans leave a huge sign of their presence. They even do things differently when it comes to like walking up to a log than what these things do.
Right.
There's all these little identifiers that you can kind of track, and you look at that whole picture. When you find all these things, then you say, yeah, well, this is something. And that's something we're always doing. We're always noting it, and we're putting it on the shelf. We might not make a determination on that for months. We got to look the rest of the area. What else is it going to feed us? And then we'll decide, okay, this is a good area.
Well, let's go back to the print for a second. Do you feel like they cover their tracks? And if so, how do you think they do this? Why do we not find more prints, good prints? And that's the question from Amy.
One is 90% of the humans that are really looking don't have any real training, so they actually need to see a good footprint to see it. As a tracker, you don't need that great print to know that something went through the area. They, I believe, are extremely aware of their footprints. They're extremely aware of themselves in the woods, and you can tell this by tracking these footprints, how they will speed up in areas where there's not much cover, and how they kind of relax and go back to a slower walk when it's real thick and nasty. That's what they like. And you can track that and actually record and document, just by the length of the strides, what it's doing in the woods. At my old property, for the life of me, I could not figure out how it was snowing and how I could never find these tracks. Yet there was stuff that was happening overnight. I was finding it the next day, and I'm like, where in the hell is the tracks? It boggled my mind. It took years to figure out. They were using the most used game trail. That's something they don't normally do. They don't normally walk the game trails. You got a human trail. Outside the human trail, you have game trails. And then usually you're going to find a sign of their trail. And sometimes they'll intersect the game trails. But these things are walking in the snow in a very heavily used stretch where deer were going through there nightly, and you could see the print with all the deer steps in it, just covered. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. That's pretty smart. And that's how your theory starts changing. Like, okay, this isn't just an animal. Right. If it knows to use a freaking deer trail to hide its prints, and that's even aware that it's making prints. Another thing they do a lot is when they come up to a log, they put that one forward facing foot, they put it right into the corner of the log. That first step is right almost under, like wedged. And we see that all the time. I mean, that's just an indicator for us. Like, most humans jump up and they stand on the log and they jump off. And, you know me, I'm walking logs all the time, following and making a spectacle of myself. That's not what you see with them. They have they're aware. Like, they'll step into that log and then step over. And then I swear sometimes they must swing from a tree and you might not see another print for 25 feet. And then it'll if you keep the course, eventually the soil changes and you'll find that other print to kind of let you know that you're on the right track. But a lot of the soil across is not good for prints. So and it's everywhere. They're not walking in sand, they're not walking in mud, they're walking in leaf cover, all different types of aggregate in the soil. And you just have to be really good. It's just like a manhunter. A manhunter that's tracking a human, has to use all those same skills to find somebody. And there's guys out there that are good at that, that know that just because you don't see a footprint, you might just see a little piece of moss off the rock. And that's what you got to go on until you find something else that makes sense. Like, okay, I'm still on the right trail. We'll put a little marker down and we'll head out. We'll do a radius. And there's so many times you don't find it right off the bat. You just got to keep going back. You got to take your time. You got to stop. You got to get on your hands and knees, and you just got to stop until you find that next one. And then you might just find the slightest little something, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to go to the next step.
These are just invaluable tips for people that are kind of coming up through the ranks. And a lot of times I hate to use the word researcher, and I kind of like Dan Ricky's expression, searchers. And we're out there searching. But I want to remind everybody, if you're on Facebook and you have not gotten on the House of Enoch Facebook page, this is Kain's page. And there is so much good stuff on there. And we were talking about tree knocks earlier. And it was just a few days ago that you posted a video about, a lot of times people will ask, well, are these creatures just walking through the woods and with a stick in their hand? And if you hear a knock, then all of a sudden you hear another knock from a different direction. So was the stick in their hand? They wouldn't have had time to pick anything up. But I want to play a video now of what a hypothesis of what Kain brings out that it could be. So we'll play this video now.
Howdy. A lot of people talk about tree knocks, but then the question always arises, does that mean something's walking around carrying a stick in its hand? And does that make sense? Well, I'll try this technique that I've learned, and you can tell me whether or not you've heard something similar to this. This really hurts my hand. But you can get a nice tree knock sound by cupping your hand and hitting a tree. Sounds like a tree knock, doesn't it?
That was a great observance, Kain. I know one time that we were reviewing some audio and Shelley Reed says, I don't believe this is a stick that's hitting a tree. She said, to me, it sounds like a hand slap on its chest. And there were some other people that listened to what she believed that it could be, and she was really chastised for it. But I think that instead of just putting everything in one box, that it would only be a stick hitting a tree, making the tree knock noise, that it could be other things, like a chest slap, or like how we just saw how you cupped your hand and hit that tree. And I think it's just really wise not to think outside the box and not be, once you think something, that you stick to it and you don't look for other things.
Absolutely. Shelley Reed, I would choose researching with Shelley Reed over probably 90% of the people that I know out there. She's awesome, and she's exactly right as far as I look at it like this. If you got, they probably do a mouth pop. They probably hit their chest. They probably slap a tree, and they probably hit. I mean, we know that they use sticks because we've heard them splinter, when they're hitting the tree.
Right.
But I think it's what's nearby. So they're optimi- they optimize whatever's around them. If all they got, I mean, you've seen me and Eric do the clap. That's loud. What's kind of funny about that video is that was probably my third take, and my hand, I can do it so much louder, but my hand was throbbing because it hurts your hand. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, just practicing, like, kind of weary at first and get my hand strong enough. And with so many things that I do, it's practicing, whether it's making a fire or the stuff that I do in my outdoor trail site. You've got to practice it. So I've been practicing for a long time just to see, if I could cut my hand and hit a tree rather than just do this. And I think it's very viable that they probably do all those things, and you should never tie yourself to just one thing.
True. That's very true.
Yeah, you pigeonhole. You put yourself in a bubble, and that's what I mean. I talk to everybody. I've learned so much. The beautiful thing about doing this is the people that you meet. You listen. You don't have to agree. You don't have to agree at all with a lot of people, but you listen, and through that conversation, you might learn something. They might learn something from you, and you just broaden your horizon and at least consider what they're saying. I mean, there's some people out there that I talk to that a lot of people think are nuts, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've experienced that. So they're not so nuts as what they're just bold enough to talk about it. Some of these more crazy things that you see, none of us want to talk about that because it puts you in a box. Like, this really weird stuff happened, but as soon as I say it publicly, everybody's going to think you went off the deep end. But the truth of the matter is, weird stuff does happen. That's extremely hard to explain. And, we talk. I tell you guys, there's so much stuff that I've told you guys that you don't see me posting out publicly. But, I think as a friend and a valued researcher, if I don't mention it, then I'm not doing my job as far as, because this stuff happens.
Right. I tell you, you do need to keep things close to your chest, but it's also good to have that inner circle that you can talk to and know that you're not going to be judged, and they're going to listen to whatever you have to say, just as if they were to say it themselves. And I think that's one reason that you and Eric Tipton and me and Larry, we all work well together when we go into the woods. If somebody has an idea, if somebody has a theory, one thing that I know Eric pointed out to me, and I had never connected the dots with it, but it was what you were talking about earlier with the X's. And we had found an X close to a primitive campsite where me and Larry were camping at. And Eric said, look, if you went another 10 feet up, your head would peek over the crest of this ridge and something could see you right below it. And I really, that struck home with me, and I got in as many recorders as I put out. I can't tell you the times that I have found X's on both sides of those recorders. And so I think it's really important that you do have people that you can talk to, and that are not, if they do have a different opinion, they're going to listen to your opinion just as if it was theirs. And Go ahead.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do when when you're doing what we do and you're researching this subject is surround yourself by yes people. You have communities now of yes people that anything goes. Yeah. Whatever picture is posted, it's a blur, it's a piece of bark, it's a leaf hanging off a tree. It's if you surround yourself with yes people, you're never going to get very far. You have like the biggest asset for me ever is meeting and getting with Eric and being able to bounce things off of him, but also for him to say, that ain't good enough. Prove it. That is invaluable.
Yeah.
Because it makes you better. When I really, really thought at my old property, I was onto something. But when he said, no, prove it, it made me work harder. I mean, it started what I've become today by researching. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to prove it to you. And that's how I started researching every single day, was because of that conversation. I was like, he's right. This could be just a guy walking through the woods at night. There's not enough. So he drove that. And that's what's so great about us is we can send each other stuff and we can talk amongst a small group and bounce things off and save ourselves some embarrassment, because we're right. All of us can make mistakes, but when you have a nice group of people that can look at it in your inner circle and kind of put it through its paces and catch something or debunk it, I mean, you need that. And then if everybody's like, yeah, this is something, then you can post it or whatever you're going to do, and you will have some people that are supporting you right off the bat, for one, that will help field the questions of, what we try to do on anything that we ever post, as much information as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Before and after pictures, as much backstory. We try to answer all those questions that you're going to get right off the bat. We try to answer those when we're telling what happened. And sometimes that means, we got a picture of something and it looks really black in the woods. You've got to freaking go back. I don't buy that as an excuse. You can just snap pictures and post them, because I've done it and gone back, and 99% of the time it's something that's still there, and that's just terrible research, and that is not good for our community, because the outsiders that just happen to pop in every once in a while, they see that stuff and they're like, these guys are a bunch of jokers. And it's almost offensive that they're surrounded by so many people that are cheering them on.
Yeah.
You've got to, and when you do, it's funny, when you put all that together and you have before and after pictures and all this stuff, it's crickets, man.
Yeah.
People just take it in and they don't have the easy explanations.
That's one thing that Eric talked about. When you do have the backstory and you've got the before and after pictures, if it's a structure and one day it's got 13 leaners against it, and then you come back 3 days later and there's only 9 leaners to it, and you come back a couple of days later and there's 19 leaners against it, then and you've got all this backstory, and it's like what you said and what Eric said, it's nothing but crickets, and you post it on a group forum and it'll get buried by a Bigfoot coffee cup every time. Won't it, Larry?
It sure will. It's aggravating. I mean, anything good, anything tangible evidence that's presented will get very few likes and very few comments because they got nowhere to go with it.
Absolutely. House of Enoch, my site, I really don't get a lot of, I got a lot of people that watch it. I don't get a lot of feedback of people trying to fight me. And the biggest reason is something Eric taught me a long time ago. He's like, if you didn't see it do it, don't call it a Bigfoot. So the entire site of House of Enoch, I never say the word Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see, now I can say the individual, and stuff like that. But you leave Bigfoot out of it, and then you're just presenting the evidence.
Right.
It takes people that doesn't press that hot button on them. And that's really all I care about anyway, because House Enoch is more like a blog. It's my daily journey out in the woods and what I'm discovering as it happens. Hopefully I can catch it on camera or audio or take pictures at the very least. And just, here's a diary. If you go way back, you can even see how we started to evolve. There's stuff in the beginning that's dumb. I'm not scared to have that on there, because that's the process of learning. You can't be scared to make mistakes. That everybody will do that. That should not hold you back on trying something new and out of the box. Just go back, and if you think you got something, go back and prove it to yourself before you put it out there. And it's not as fantastical. It's not, it might not be as good of a story as saying, hey man, look at what I got in the woods, but nobody's buying that. Yeah. You got all the people that are agreeing, that are in their own little community. And I don't think half of them buy it either. It's like, I look at stuff on a daily basis, and I'm not people look at it. I'm like, man, what are you even looking at? I'm seeing a tree, I'm seeing a stump, I'm seeing a leaf.
Every day.
Yeah.
This is one reason Larry and I gravitated towards you and Eric, is that y'all are every bit as skeptical of evidence as we are. And what I mean by that, there are a lot of people that are searching for Bigfoot and want to claim anything that they cannot explain as Bigfoot did it. Some folks, really, it seems their drive is focused on bragging about what they found and how important their opinions are, instead of being diligent and dissecting what they found, looking for additional clues and eliminating everything that it could be first. Kain, I'd like for you to talk to us about when you do find evidence that you believe may be Bigfoot related. What is your next move?
It's always a slow process. And I'll tell you what, the really good evidence, and you kind of hit on that, the really good stuff you find, you immediately start second guessing yourself. So we automatically go into skeptic mode. When I see something the next day, I have to go through a process, and I have to go back through, I've got 10,000 pictures. I'll go back through. Sometimes I'll make a video and I'll be like, man, I'm not going to post that yet until I go back and make sure I'm right, even though in my mind I know I'm right. So when I find something that I really think is Bigfoot related, I document it. That's the first thing. And then I put it on the shelf. And then with my process is I try to build on this story every day. And what's amazing, one of the most breakthroughs I've ever had, even here, was not that long ago. For almost a year, I've been seeing all these individual sites, finding them, it's all discovery. I'm finding it, I'm documenting it, and I'm putting it on the shelf, and I'm just I'm learning this whole area. I got lost. Like I said, most of the time, just what I have to do, because I work an hour and a half from here. So I have a 3-hour drive every day in the car. So when I get home, I don't even walk into the cabin. The only way I can do it is I get out of my truck and I go right into the woods. And that just, if I get inside and sit down, I'm done.
Yeah.
So that's not, I just go out. So I'm finding all these things over the course of almost a year, and I get lost. And when I got lost, I was lost bad. And I found this like amazing spot. And I'm like, holy crap, I've got to find my way back at this point. This is all this stuff here. And I had eventually gotten so lost that I had actually crossed my own property and didn't realize it, and got back into no man's land again. And I ended up, because it was dark, there's no self service. You walk outside the cabin, you're done. You're off the Google can't find, nothing can find you. So I knew a way to get home. I hiked to that spot and went the long way, all the way back. Finally got home in the dark, no flashlight. I wasn't planning on getting lost. But I had taken some pictures, and I ended up figuring out how I got lost. So the next day, I got lost on purpose. A little more daylight, and I knew where I started, and I found the spot that I was looking for, and everything over the last 8 months opened up to me. And it was, I felt like crying. It was like, all of a sudden, it's like, holy crap, this all makes sense now. Everything I've been looking at here, it all came together in that moment. And I realized there was 3 corridors, and that all the activity that I've witnessed, whether it's tree knocks, stuff hitting the side of my cabin, trees breaking, all the stuff that I've physically heard and footprints I found, was these 3 corridors. I never knew it. I couldn't put the mental picture together. All these places that I find, and I was able to expand way beyond my area, because that's what I was doing. And all of a sudden, it's like, holy crap, these are three separate corridors. And that's why, on occasion, you get activity around here, is because they are, when I had the story about hearing something across the pond, that's a corridor there. Behind me, when I did the mouth pop, and something came running down the woods, because it wasn't him. So he's like, I don't know who did that. So, he put a stop to that. There's a corridor up there. It's like everything all of a sudden just came to light. And I'm like, oh my God. I clear back to the part where I was talking about it putting its own signature right beside mine. That was part of the same corridor. It took me a year to learn that was the same 3 corridors. And it was like the clouds opened up and heaven shined on me that day. I'm like, oh my God, and it's so validating. One of the things I found I've been posting about that one stump,
right?
That's all this crazy stuff on it. There was a 9-inch print, which makes me think of a juvenile, but I ended up figuring out, how these corridors all worked, and miles away, just on saying, okay, if this is right, I can walk this corridor, and it's going to produce something. A mile away, the 9-inch print. I'm like, wow. Holy crap. That's the same thing that went within close proximity to the cabin. It's on that corridor. That's why it's all there. And I think that between me doing the little signature stuff and drumming and drawing the attention from them, kind of like putting a spotlight on me as an individual, like I'm here, this is who I am, drew them in closer to where I live. Because the corridors, like I said, there's one that kind of crosses property, the other ones don't, but they go really close. And I think with all that, just identifying myself, I've probably been observed more than I even know.
Yeah.
But when they hear that drum, and I'll take that drum with me when I hike, and I'll be way out, and I'll just sit on a log and I'll drum a little bit, just because it's carrying. Like anything that's a mile away from that point, was going to be like, hey, the drummer's out and about. And they also observe me. I don't, on my daily research here, I don't try to interact. I try to observe. I try to listen. One thing I learned on this property, and I don't know if it's everywhere, but a knock is never returned with another knock here. Now, Eric has witnessed the same individual over the course of several valleys. When he was here, he heard this thing knocking. It was the same one, knocking as it kept getting closer. It was, he said that it was one of the closest knocks he had ever heard. That being that close to it when it did it. But when I'm out here and I'm just listening, I'm not interacting because, I want to know the sounds of my area. I want to know what calls are being used in my area. I want to identify knocks. And one thing I picked up on was that you'll hear a knock and then it's like 10 minutes before you hear the response. And every single time the response is never a knock back. It's always something different. And they'll be like 3. And it'll be over the course of a half hour before you hear all 3 responses. It's really interesting. One response, because it's on this corridor, there is an abandoned homestead. And I think it's real close to where this corridor is. I can hear it hitting the tin roof of this fallen down homestead. Because I'll hear a knock, 10 minutes go by, it distinctly sounds like something metal. And if you're out here, I mean, there is no metal out there except for this homestead. And this homestead just happens to be where this corridor is. So there, 10 minutes later, you hear something hit metal. Then over where the other corridor is, you'll hear something else. It won't be a knock, but they all 3 will do something individual. And the way I look at it is if I'm out here and I'm at night and I go up on the top of the ridge and I'm doing all the wrong stuff, then they know, like, oh, what's the human doing over there? That kind of defeats the purpose. Certain calls are very distinct here that aren't distinct in other parts of the country. And, we've been all over the country. We've heard some calls are very distinct for a certain area. So you might be doing a whoop, and that's not the protocol. I don't hear, it's rare. Like we definitely hear calls, but it's not every night. It's not like they call back and forth for 25 minutes. It's never been that in the entire time I've ever done this. You might hear a distant call and maybe a response, but to me, you need to know your area. You need to put your ears on, maybe have a recorder, and go out and leave that recorder out there for a week. Listen, see what you're hearing, and use that in your area. That way you're falling in line. Like you might be able to confuse one. Like here, if you hear a knock and I do, go over and hit a piece of metal at 9 minutes, I might be able to trick that one over there, thinking that it's responding.
Yeah, we've kind of found that because we do go to different states and different areas. And it's just like where you will hear mimics. And some places it may be owls, and the other places it could be dogs. And there's a place in Oklahoma where we have heard what it sounds like, something hitting metal. And also when we were with y'all up in Ohio in a different area, we kept hearing what sounded like metal being hit. And there wasn't nothing like that nowhere around us.
Yeah, it's insane. I've been literally in the back doing, I think I was making a hiking stick or something. I was working, carving on it. And this has happened to me so many times. I will hear something that sounds like a tree fell through my carport. And I'll literally walk around the cabin, and I'm right there within 20 seconds, walk that whole area, and there's nothing. I don't even know how to explain it. Because I'm looking at like, okay, a tree just fell, because trees fall out here, and you never know when you're getting home. It's always an adventure if there's trees going to be across the road or what. You walk, there's nothing. There's just that. I don't know what that is, but it happens. And a lot of times it's a very metal sound. A donk. You're like, what the hell was that? Just recently, I was telling you guys a little earlier, just the beginning of this week, I actually heard a version of Bear's Call. I've never heard that call in Ohio ever. And it was different, but it was the same call. I mean, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, holy cow. I mean, that's a very distinct thing. And it was a definitely different, but if you guys know what I'm talking about, it was the same call. Mm-hmm. And that's the first time I've ever experienced that, because I really was thinking that, down south, his calls are extremely effective. I've witnessed it. Up here, the calls up until this point is not really what I hear. What I hear out in the woods. So we try to mimic what we hear up here when we're up here, and try to follow suit. And I'm not a call guy. I'm just not very good anyway. So I'm an observer. I listen. I'm really into the knocks and counting, the space between the knocks, what's happening, what's the response to that knock. If I hear a knock out here and I do a whoop, I just gave myself away, because that's not what they do.
Yeah.
Here, at least. That's not what they do at whatever you want to call them, this tribe. They have their own little thing that they do. And I think people can really just expose themselves and maybe hamper their research on, you got a weekend and you're out there, if you're doing the wrong stuff, you're not helping yourself. And that's why you got to really kind of research and then plan your outings and plan your weekends. Just don't wing it. Spend some time. Like when you guys came to Ohio with us, me and Eric planned that for a year.
Yeah.
For that weekend, we planned that for a year. And that's why we had so much success, is because we put a year's worth of work for that one night, that one weekend.
And what a weekend that was.
Yeah.
Larry, I cannot believe we've been on the air for an hour and a half. Have we got any questions we need to address? Okay, well, let's go through a few of them.
All right. You talked about the stump a while ago. Amy asked, have you or do you practice gifting? If so, have you had success, and could you give an example?
Okay. Yeah, I do gifting. I don't do food. And I've really kind of learned over the years that, for me anyway, things that come from humans are things that they tend to avoid. But you can have just as much success with a rock or a pine cone or something. And a lot of times what we've learned is, I'd go out and you wouldn't necessarily be a gift, but I would make a configuration on a log. And one thing Eric pointed out once this started happening is whatever was walking by had its own opinion of what it should look like, and it moved the rocks around. Uh-huh. I'd come back and I'd move the rocks around, and it'd come back like no, or knock it all off. And it was really interesting to kind of watch this. So I don't do food. Sometimes I'll do a feather. Sometimes I'll just mimic what they've done and get, like, if it does a certain thing. I've gotten a lot of feedback from just mimicking what they've done. They come by, even if they come by and like knock it off and be like, hey, that's not mine. Hey, that tells you, it was there, what night it was there, especially if you're finding it the next day.
Yeah.
All right, Kain. Kurt wants to know about vocalizations and mimicking.
They absolutely mimic, and they're really good at it. The vocals, and it's really hard. Like, one thing that I do is I lay every single night with my window open, as long as the weather will permit it. And I lay there and I just listen. You learn so much, and there's so many times where it's hard to decipher. Like, was that a dog bark or was that something else? Was that coyotes, or was there something that sounded really weird within the coyotes, or there's this really weird vocal that set off the coyotes. But I just listen to vocalizations, and in my experience, it's one thing I got to tell everybody is these things are not behind in the woods every night. That's not how they operate. Right. It's every 3 weeks. It's almost impossible to track how to time that. We try to get out in front of them when we're doing our research. Try to predict not where they're at, but where they're going to be. But they might be there for 3 days. They might be there for one night. They're really hard to predict, but you can definitely, when you're listening, you can hit, like I know when things are going on out there just because it's so not normal, I guess, to what I'm used to hearing on a nightly basis.
And that's all you got to say about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, the vocalizations.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, that's the biggest thing I can say about vocalizations is, man, you just listen. You got to, before you try what you see on TV, listen to whatever area you want to research. Yeah. Go out there, man, and record a bunch of audio and find those weird vocalizations and do those. You're going to have so much more is going to increase your chances so much more if you're producing something that is they're used to hearing. Like we hear the weird owl calls, they mimic all kinds of stuff. And one thing about these things is they don't only just mimic vocalizations, they mimic things in nature. And that is what's so hard. Yeah. And that's what took us so long for me and Eric to pick out. They mimic things that happen in nature. So it's almost impossible to walk by and just see what they're doing on a monthly basis. You've got to kind of see it change. And then you're like, oh, well, okay, that wasn't there last night. And then you can start your eyes open and you start seeing the woods completely different than what I ever did when I first started. I look out in the woods and sometimes it's like billboard signs. Hey, we're over here. It's really like that. I mean, and to go back to that, so many people have helped us throughout, us doing this. And what really put Eric and I in a totally different direction came from a lady, a really perceptive lady put us on this path. And when I heard her the first time, I thought she was crazy. But I walked with her, and my God, after walking several miles and over a mountain, I'm like, she is on something. And I told her, I said, I'm going to take this back home, Eric and I, and we're going to look at this at home. And my God, it was something to it. So don't put yourself in that bubble. Talk to people. Right. Don't think that a girl isn't just as good as a researcher as a guy, because I'm telling you what, there's some badass girls out there that are doing this, and they make sense, and they have a different eye to look at things. Shelley Reed, Debbie, Vicky, all of them, they are badass. They're great women to hang out with out in the field. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole bunch of them, so I apologize.
We kind of notice behind you when you're talking of your surveillance camera. And that just goes to show how diligent you are, Kain. It's constantly going in every waking moment. What can you do to put that last piece of the puzzle in and make it work.
Absolutely. It's I have a total of 7 cameras out there. I've learned I've had them stretched way out in the woods, and I've done some experimentation. So what I've done now is I've moved these cameras back close, because the activity seemed to get further away.
Yeah,
and that's not what I want. I want the activity to get closer. So I moved all the cameras. Everything you see back here is pretty close. There's all kinds of room to go around, and it's kind of designed that way. Like, you can easily maneuver around this. And at the same time, there is no worse feeling in the world when I'm walking out, pitch dark, out to my truck. I hear something, and I walk around the corner, and the motion light on my camera is on. And it's up 8 feet off the ground. I'm like, oh God, I got to go walk by this thing and get my truck. I just do it because it's just one more aspect. Really what I'm kind of hoping is I'll catch some eye shine or something back in the distance a little bit.
Yeah.
And I move these around. Right now they've been in the same position for quite a while. I did put them in like some really hot areas, so the activity kind of just slowed down there. So I'm like, this is defeating the purpose. So I'm going to move it back in where things can still move around. And within a month or so, the activity got closer again. I'm like, all right, I've got, and some of it's, I don't know why, I'm so remote, but some of it is for protection anyway. You can't come on my property without me knowing. I mean, they're all the way down the driveway. I will know far in advance before you ever get here. And if you're not supposed to be here, I will have something waiting for you. What do you do?
All right, Kain. Vicky's got a question for you. What's the weirdest, creepiest, strangest encounter you've had in the woods?
Man, there's been a bunch.
Keep it clean, though.
There's been things that were really creepy that you probably call paranormal. After the rock throw video when at the old place and they like assaulted my house, that night was probably the scariest I've ever been. I
remember you calling me that night. And I could just hear it in your voice, and then it seemed like it calmed down. All of a sudden, it just start ramping right back up, and that was just, I can't even imagine what was going through your mind that night.
It was extremely stressful. One thing I think with experience, though, I've learned is, as humans, we attribute that this is vengeful. It did feel vengeful in that scenario, but like here, when something ran up and banged the carport, it scared me. But after a moment, I collected myself, and I'm like, I don't know. He might just be saying hi. So why am I walking away? He has given me no indication that he wants to kill me. So I'm going to go back out there, and not only am I going to go back there, I'm going to get as close as I can. I'm going to turn my back to it and just see what happens. Yeah. Just to show it that, okay, I'm not scared anymore, because I had to make up for bugging out, try to get some respect back. I had a really, and I contacted Matt Knapp, and I think you guys, I was trying to, this happened, and there was I wouldn't say it was the creepiest thing, but it was really weird. The thing that was like, it was making like an electrical noise.
Yeah.
And I was walking. I was actually on tracking, and it kind of came through, and it was down on the property, and I kept hearing it sounded like either like an electric eel underwater or like a stun gun when you just hold it in the air and it crackles.
Uh-huh.
I kept hearing that, and there was only one thing that had an electrical source. So obviously I walked over to that, and it's not making that noise. And I'm just, briefly stopped. The whole time I was videoing, and you can hear some of the crackling. It's really light. So I'm like, I don't know what that is. I'm totally thinking it's something wiring, you know. I start walking back, and to my left, I'd actually walked right by it. Didn't realize, and I just caught it in my peripheral, but something really long and dark just busted out of the brush and down the hill. And as soon as it did that, all that electrical noise stopped. So I walked over to where I'd seen it, and really fast, it was across the road. I could hear it over there. So I just kept sitting there. And after a while, it was maybe 20 minutes, I just went, whoo. And across the ridge, up on that hill where I heard that, I hear, whoo. And I'm like, I talked to Matt Knapp about it. I'm like, have you ever experienced this electrical sound? I don't know. I don't know. But I did experience it. I heard it. Never heard it since. That was pretty weird.
All right. Somebody named Folklore Hidden Giants wants to know, when is he having that tall, in-shape, sexy partner his back out?
What was that now?
When are you having your tall, in-shape, sexy partner back out to your place to research?
My partner, every single weeknight, he's always welcome here, whether I'm here or not. He's the only person in the world that I trust that would be out here. We keep our little areas.
Wait a second. Did you say the only person?
Here? No, you guys are far away. So
okay. All right.
I'd say in Ohio, I would have no problem, with him on a weeknight or whatever. I value his opinion that much, so it's always an open invitation.
I hear you. All right. Pappy Two Bears says, have you found any connecting trails between the main corridors?
Yeah. What happens is when we talk about corridors running through the woods, it's almost like they'll have their corridors, but there's always an extra option, because I think probably when they do it, they don't really know what they're going to encounter. So you might have a corridor that they're using with every 100 yards, there might be a different route. And I think it's probably just based on what they're seeing at the time. It's not always just, this is all we're doing. I think they'll do that. They'll use that until they see something, or really believe that they have scouts out ahead that kind of pick the path for the group. And maybe there's more. I mean, it's a theory. But I think they kind of go and they lay out the safe trail, and then the group kind of follows behind them. And that's why there's all these little turnoffs and options, probably to be the best word for it. They think they own it all anyway. It's all theirs.
Yeah.
Usually when you find corridors, it is there for a reason. Maybe it's the exact perfect spot between two properties where neither property can neither hear or see. Maybe it's a big crevice that kind of they can go through somewhere. And my old property, what was so nice about that was there's really no reason that they should have been there, but it was a bottleneck. So it was an easy area to research because there was a bottleneck, and they were going through there simply because they had to get from point A to point B, because there was not enough resources in that direct area to sustain something for very long. They were using that just to get to the other area of resource. They had to go through this bottleneck because they had to. And that was kind of eye-opening. And then you start, because there was properties around there, and you would start seeing, like, that's where we start catching, like, there's not much vegetation here. So they built their own blind so they could go look, go like this or whatever they do, and work their way through that property. But it was a small area, and that's something maybe if you're in your own research, try to look for bottlenecks, areas where you think, man, they're going to go for cover. I had some dingback tell me a long time ago, I won't mention what group they're with, tell me that they use hiking trails because it's the path of least resistance. And all the years that Eric and I have ever done that is the exact opposite of what they will do. They will walk through miles of briars and thorns and the worst stuff in the world that you'd ever want to, because most humans won't do that. So it's a great cover. We're just dumb enough that we would do it. We would follow it. And it was nasty. Those are the areas that they feel comfortable in. You can see that by tracking them. They are comfortable with a lot of cover, and they're comfortable with an escape route. There's usually like some kind of barrier, like a deep creek or their long field, a meadow, that they like to put themselves in between them and the human population that might be there. They like this barrier, even a very steep incline. Think of how hard it is for a human just to get up to the top of a very steep incline. It takes us forever, which they go right up. That's enough time for them to maybe hear you coming. They're already up the ridge, and they know you're not going to be up there for another 20 minutes or whatever it takes.
Well, that's good points, because thicker the cover, not only do they feel comfortable, but anything coming in after them, they can hear easily and be gone.
One of the, and I can't remember exactly who said this. I know it was on the Outlaws. One thing I took to heart that made so much sense to me is these things are hiding not just from us. They're hiding from everything because they're apex predators.
Yeah.
And they're hiding they don't want the deer in the area to know that they're there. So it's just ingrained in them to hide, not just from us, just to hide from the things that they're eating. Right. A lot of people, there's a lot of discussion whether they're vegetarians or whether I honestly think they eat whatever they can to be that size, and maybe it's seasonal, but they're hiding from their prey, even on a nightly basis. They're set up to kind of be stealthy and ambush. That's what, when we find the game trails that have all the brush over it, they're what we call kill boxes. They're taking and manipulating the trail. They're chasing the deer down their deer trail that they know they're going to use. And then they have this big barrier across the trail, and they got something waiting right there. It's got to jump or dodge, and they ambush it. I mean, that's a theory, but I think it's a pretty good one.
No, I agree. All right. Having researched multiple states, have you noticed difference in aggression in different locales? Not locals.
Locals. Definitely have seen differences in kind of what they do, like how to track them. Some of the southern states, like I get down there and it's not as sophisticated maybe as what you're used to seeing up here. I don't know if that's a good word for it or not, but it's different. And I mean, we've had aggressiveness everywhere, but a lot of that's self-inflicted, because that's what Eric and I used to do all the time. We would push. We had to learn what is the closest you can get before something's going to come out and mess you up. So we got really good at figuring out the stages of an encounter, from the initial tree knock to things getting thrown at you, to keep pushing to where you start hearing the sticks breaking and he's showing you how bad he is. That's the time where you need to start backing out, because the next step, he might actually, the last thing it wants to do is expose itself. The last thing it wants to do is vocalize. It's only going to do that if it has to. And you want, we got good at getting right up to the limit. That was weird. I don't know what that was. It's probably a squirrel. But get right up to that stage where it's probably about ready to do something and then back out. We got really good at that. So a lot of it's been self-inflicted. And like I said, when we go on our outings across, the country, you've got a week. So you might do stuff more so than what you would in your regular research area. You might do more calls. You might, because you're trying to incite something, even if it's negative. You're just trying to get, because you got a group of people and you're trying to get some kind of evidence. So you're pushing things a lot more in a week's time than something out here where you're kind of out for the long haul.
Right. Debbie Jones asked, do you think they spend a lot of time in the trees?
That's a great question. I think they do. I mean, I try to train myself, especially when we got our FLIR out and stuff, and we're hearing stuff. I'm always looking. I do this, go from bottom to top, because it's such a crazy question from just. I think they do, and I think like the biggest question, like, where do they go? Where do they go? That's what blew my mind at the last property. I was finding all this stuff the day after, literally hours after it was created, and there's nothing out. Like, you did all this, you built 10 structures just to leave 3 hours later. Mind-boggling. Yeah. What's why go through all that? And then, like, there's all these theories, where do they go? Where do they go underground? Do they hide? Every experience that I've had, they're just plopped down. The encounter I had here when I was walking, I was doing an outdoors video, and something threw a rock and hit the tree and screamed. I went back and found, like, where it made a little nest, and it was just, like, right off the side of a 2-track trail. Just there. And that's where a lot of the stuff that we've been out, it's almost like they rely on their ability to get away fast. I mean, I don't know if I buy that, because it still boggles my mind. But I mean, the evidence that I've seen so far is they kind of do their thing and plop down wherever they're going to plop down, and they got good ears, and they got a little network that's watching, and if someone comes in the area, they're up and they're gone. Yeah. I don't know if it's that simple. That's something I still strive to learn more about. That's just something I see, they're definitely not making Bigfoot houses. So I don't know, kind of bed down like deer. Sometimes it seems like.
Well, we have found spots in the woods where you could tell something big has laid down and just mashed whatever it was that they were laying on. You could tell a large animal has just laid down there.
People don't realize how much nature and wilderness there really is still out here.
Yeah.
I mean, even where I'm at here, I'll never research this area in my lifetime. There's so much. And you get out, I mean, it doesn't take long. You're out, you're in areas that people probably haven't seen for 100 years or better. You just don't take that far to get out. And then, what's the chances? Especially, like, I always think on private property, you have like one owner that might come out there that you might have to, that's pretty easy odds, even for a human. I think I could hang out, and if I only had to worry about one family, I'd be pretty good at being able to see them coming and be gone before they ever get there. I mean, I kind of have to do that now because, I mean, I have to follow wherever they're going, wherever that takes me. So I'm hiding sometimes too, just like they have to. If I want to truly track the trackways, I got to put myself in areas that I probably shouldn't be in. But I got to hide. I just got to hide like they do, and I'm just very respectful. And hope for the best.
Larry, we're almost 2 hours into this. Do we have any questions that we need to ask real quick?
Well, what are your thoughts on the theory that they can throw their voices? That's the only question left.
I have never really considered it. That I guess the best way, if I was to buy into that theory, and I really haven't given a lot of thought, but there's been times we have heard giggling. Sounds like girls giggling out in the middle of freaking nowhere, and you walk right to where you hear the giggling, and there's nothing there. That's happened. It's a real experience, and so are they throwing their voice? They certainly weren't there by the time I got there, and they weren't that far away when I heard it. It's frustrating because you hear the stuff, and I mean, it sounds just like little girls giggling at you, and you're 45 minutes to an hour off the nearest trail. There's no reason a little girl should be out there, but yet you hear that, and we walk right to it. I mean, there's a matter of 30, 40 seconds, and you're there at that spot, and there's nothing there. So I don't know. It's a good question, though.
Well, Kain, do you have any last thoughts that you would like to talk about before we go off the air?
I guess the only thing about is, within our community, there's so much negative. There's so many people that are only there to tear you down. And that's why I don't tear people down. I'll ignore it. And if someone comes to me and they got some stuff that's just really bad research, I try to embrace them, and say, hey, why don't you try this? I try to reach out and show them my best side to anybody that I meet that really wants to talk. Try to make it a positive experience, because you think of, meeting you guys and our family that we have got, that we're so close and we see each other, and our last outing, that's family. It's more of seeing these people that you love, and we're all brought together by this the same subject. And I did a recent outing up here, and I don't do a lot of that. Very little. I'm usually in the woods. So, but one thing I learned is people can have different opinions. They're good people. They're good people. When you sit down, you can sit down by a fire with somebody and have a great conversation and lift each other up. And you might not agree at all, but you can have that conversation, and it's only based on your own experience. I believe a certain way because this is what I've experienced for myself.
Yeah.
There might be someone that's seen a UFO land and 10 Bigfoots to get out. I'm not, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to talk about it because I think it's a great story. No matter what I'm thinking in my head, I still value the story, and I still value the people that I'm talking to. And I just wish, we could just be more approachable, and all this clicks and stuff. Just, that's one thing I love about you guys. You guys have a whole site that anybody can go to, that you're there to help. There's no chips on your shoulder. I get a lot of audio people send me. I always refer them to you because you guys are the best at it. You guys are the best. I tell people, talk to these guys. They have a whole team. They will break down your audio. They'll gladly help you with that, and put some science in it. They'll get the spectrograph and they'll give you something fast, because you have a whole network of people that can break down an audio, hours of audio, and man, you're turning it back, and you're glad to have that they used you, and you're just out there to help people.
Well, there's no reason to be ugly to anyone. And I think that if we always take the high road, and it's like what you said, we may not agree, but we can carry on a conversation and have respect for one another. And you may be able to pick out that little nugget that they say, and you might be able to apply it to your own research. And so I just think it's always best to take the high road.
I think, the biggest thing that I take away from doing this and being out, doing this every night, being out in the woods, the solitude, most nights I'm not even talking, night after night after night, I'm by myself. I'm just out here with the animals. This thing has taught me, this research has taught me like a level of respect, even like for a Bigfoot. I mean, from where I started to now, the respect that I have for this thing is almost on a spiritual level. Like I've learned more from chasing it than I'll ever learn from me, because it's just like how they do it, man. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And when you do, like, I've got some communication going back and forth now. It's amazing. It's amazing that what is it trying? Is it trying to finally just teach me something? Is it trying? Like, I don't know. I'm just recording it and going with the flow. But I mean, it's like I just have so much respect, and it's they're peaceful. They really don't need us. They don't really want us. And if you approach it with that kind of respect and attitude, I mean, I've often said, man, I want to just strip down completely naked, go out in the woods and get in a ball and be like, hey, I'm not trying, I don't have no cameras, I don't have nothing, teach me, and
Yeah.
And in my heart, sometimes I feel like that might be the best approach. Like, you get their respect first. You got to earn that for however you do it. And I think by being respectful, to who they are as a species, they will return that respect eventually. I really believe that.
Yeah, me
and
too.
It's a way of taking it on with the rest of your life and the people you deal with and stuff. It's been such a growing experience, even on a spiritual level.
I agree with that. Whenever you first start this subject out, you're trying to learn the truth of the subject, but you wind up learning more truth about yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Larry, do you have any closing comments?
No, to the people watching, Kain hasn't even got into any of his knowledge or intellect here. We could have him on 15 times and still scrape the surface. Him and Eric both are just, the time they've spent in the woods and the things they've come across. And I mean, it's great. If you're not listening to this and learning something from him and from what Eric did last week, then I don't know how else we can help you.
Well, they ought to be checking out House of Enoch daily.
Yes.
Because Kain is in the woods every day. And so, Kain, thanks again for coming on tonight. We love you and we appreciate you. And we're just so glad to be able to go out with you and Eric. So, thanks again, Kain.
Well, absolutely. And for anybody, I appreciate anyone that's taking their time out of their day to just sit with us and talk and listen. We sit on a lot of information, and we've got some groundbreaking stuff, and we will share it once we know we're right. Once we can back it up, and it's I personally believe we've got more stuff we're sitting on than anything that's happened since the Patterson-Gimlin film of real research. But the responsible thing to do is to put that to test. And that's what we're doing now. We've got all these things that we're pretty damn sure this is exactly what's going on, and it's going to be a huge thing for the community either to listen or not. But we're going to make sure that we can back it up. And when we do present it, there'll be data that someone, a scholar, can look at. And that's what we're trying to do, is bring some real legitimacy to this. And when we do present something and it's a great claim, you have to have great evidence. So that's exactly what we're doing. I appreciate you guys. Love you guys. We'll be in the woods soon.
Won't be long.
Nope.
Well, we want to thank all of our new subscribers and our faithful followers. Also, be sure to check out our field evidence videos if you haven't yet. And if there's any guests you would like to see on Beast TV, post their names in the comment section, and we will sick Debbie Jones on them. And I haven't brought it up tonight, but please hit that like button for us. It helps us. Leave us a comment. It helps us with the YouTube recommendations. And Larry and I would like to thank Debbie Jones and Shelley Reed for all of the behind-the-scenes work they do. And check out our sister channel, Beast of the Woods. That's Larry's channel. And our friends at Bigfoot Outlaws, Dixie Cryptid, Night Callers, and Bigfoot Odyssey. And don't forget that there is a GoFundMe page to raise money for equipment that is being bought for Bigfoot Odyssey's expedition. And Carrie Arnold from Bigfoot Odyssey is expecting to release the documentary on the Sisters of the Moon next weekend. We're really excited for that. We want to thank Kain for coming on this week, and we will see you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night night, footers.
This has been a Sawdust production.